Have you experienced trauma in your life? And you're at the point in your journey where you want to help others to heal from the same type of trauma that you once experienced. Maybe you're a sexual violence survivor. Maybe you've gone through divorce. Maybe you're a widow. Maybe you've gone through some form of domestic violence, and God has put on your heart to start some sort of healing ministry, but you question if you're ready. Well, if this is you, we are diving into this topic today in a special hour that's near and dear to my heart. This is the Sister Start Your Ministry Hour, dedicated to women just like you, women of God, who want to start a ministry that goes beyond the walls of the church. Maybe you're called to start that healing ministry, write a book, speak on stages, or build a faith based business. We talk about all of that and more in this hour. I'm your host, Reverend Jocelyn, and I built my ministry from a simple blog to a national Christian trauma healing ministry. And now I help women just like you to answer your call. So if it's your first time here, welcome, sis. I hope it's not your last. And I want to actually bless you with a gift. I have a free ministry launch starter kit to help you get going with your ministry. You can get this kit at sisterstartyourministry.com. Again, that is sisterstartyourministry.com. Also, if you're a first timer here, I'm going to invite you to do something for me. I'm going to invite you to subscribe. Okay, slam that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. Okay, now for those who are here and are my regulars, you know the drill. You got to put your name in the chat so that I know that you are here. All right, so we have some people who are here with us. We got, I think it's Lady Deal. All right, sis. How you doing? How you doing? We got Pastor Valerie. She's in the house today. All right, Pastor Valerie, good to have you here representing Chi-Town. We got Joyce, who is here with us. Joyce, welcome, welcome, welcome. Reverend Dr. Hood. Okay, I like it. Good to have you here, sister. Diana from Florida. Hey, Diana. Good to have you in the house today. And welcome those who are tuning in. Continue to put your name in the chat if you are watching and tuning in with us. Even if you're watching the replay, hashtag team replay, you let me know in the comments and I'm going to be sure to engage back with you. But today we are dealing with a subject that's near and dear to my heart. As someone who stepped out to build a Christian trauma healing ministry, the topic at hand today that we're wrestling with was the main question that I had, which is, God, I've experienced some significant trauma in my life, sexual trauma. Later on, I ended up experiencing domestic violence and divorce and going through some things, just like many of you. I question, am I equipped to do this? Am I ready to do this? Am I emotionally well enough to do this? Have you ever asked yourself that question? I I bet you have. And when you're wrestling with that, I want to put you at ease, sister, that you do not have to be at a place where you have completely arrived in your healing journey. Okay, this is one thing I want you to know. You don't have to be fully healed to help someone else to heal. But here's the thing, you do need to be stable enough that you're not actively bleeding while trying to bandage someone else. Okay. That's the trick because sometimes we step out a little prematurely and we're still emotionally bleeding on other people who we're trying to support. And even though we have the best intentions in the world, we end up causing harm. And so we want to be careful when it comes to that. And I just want to recognize Evangelist. Welcome, Evangelist Barry. Glad to have you here, sister. Thank you for joining us. And Carla's in the house as well. Welcome, sister. So, one of the things that we're going to talk about is some key signs, some key things that I want you to look out for to really discern, okay, am I ready to take this next step when it comes to starting this healing ministry? And here's the thing, if you're not ready now, it's okay. It just might be some time that you need to take before you do step out. But I want you to be honest with yourself as we go through these questions that we're about to answer today. Welcome, Dr. Arlene. Thanks for checking in with us. So, the first thing that I want you to recognize is that you don't have to be at a complete state of arrival when it comes to your healing journey. All right. And when it comes to where you're trying to be in your ministry, now I'm talking about healing ministries today, but this is also, I believe, relevant when it comes to whatever your ministry focus is. Maybe it's a diabetes ministry, maybe it's another form of a health ministry, maybe it is a business ministry. Like, so sometimes I feel like we think we have to be so far along in the process, this point of the mountaintop, before we can help people. No, 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 no. It's one of those things where even if you are just a little further ahead than the person who you're trying to help, God can still use you. But there are some guardrails around that. But when it comes to healing, I want to point out this first key point, that we can both be the healed and the healing. In some cases, we have healed from certain things. Like when we think about the situation, we don't have any emotional reactions. We completely release it. It is something that no longer has a hold on us. And then there are certain things in our lives where we can be healing in the process of. And acknowledging that and being aware of those areas where we're still in process is one of the first steps that I want you to recognize as you are considering starting this ministry. Okay. Yes. Thank you, Pastor Valerie. Yes, we don't have to be at a complete state of arrival. We can be the healed and the healing. That is right. And so, with that being said, one of the first things I want to encourage you to do, sister, as you're saying, am I ready to step out yet to start this healing ministry? Okay. My first question to you is, have you processed your trauma in private before trying to help people process theirs in public? Okay. This is big. I'm asking you to ask the question. Have you processed your trauma in private before helping others to process theirs in public? This is one of the mistakes I see people make. They have gone through some significant traumatic event, and they might process it, so to speak, by talking it with friends, but they haven't met maybe with a therapist. They haven't really gone deep to the layers of pain that's there. And they're jumping out trying to help others from good intentions, but they're still emotionally bleeding. Before you step out and try to help people in public, you want to deal with what you have going on in private, because otherwise you can bleed on people in public. I see it all the time. I see it in ministry leaders. I see it in people who speak, who share their story publicly, which is something we're going to be talking about as we continue to move forward. Thank you, Dr. Arlene. And Tiffany, oh, it's so good to see you. Thank you for being here. And so, as we recognize that, okay, we got to do some work to process our pain in private, another question that I want you to ask yourself is this: when you share your trauma story, are you reliving it or are you standing on it? Ooh, let that sit for a second. When you share your trauma story, are you reliving it? Like, it's almost like you're in the moment and you're feeling it. And you've seen people when they're reliving it before. They're there, and it's almost like they're getting re-traumatized. Or are you at a place where you're standing on it, meaning that I'm telling it from a place where I'm not emotionally connected like that. I remember how it felt, but I'm not in it. I'm standing on it from a place of, this is what God has brought me through, and I'm using this as a testimony to help others to heal. You know, sometimes when people are sharing their story, they're sharing the story out loud to still process it. And they're reliving it, but they're not standing on it. They're subconsciously not even realizing it. They're sharing it because they still need to get it out versus sharing it so that I can help others in the process of understanding they're not alone and sharing just enough without re traumatizing them. This is so important, ladies. And I appreciate the comments here in the chat. But I'm telling you, sometimes we miss it here. Sometimes we miss it here. And so let's look at what can happen if we're at a place where we're actually reliving the trauma. I have had a podcast for many years, and I thank God it was ranked top 15 Christian podcast on emotional healing in 2025 by FeedSpot. And this podcast is one in which I've interviewed like over it's now we're over at 170 episodes. I've interviewed dozens and dozens and dozens of people on their experience of healing from trauma. And in one episode in particular, I remember interviewing a dear sister, and she experienced a very traumatic event. And as she was telling her story, it was so graphic. And there was a couple times in which I had to like stop her. And I was really glad that we weren't live because I saw her. It was almost like she wasn't with me, she was in it. And the graphic details of how she shared the story would absolutely re-traumatize those who were listening. And I had to go back and try to edit it because of the graphic details. And here is the thing. I know that that beloved sister is a survivor. God is going to use her in an amazing way. But I saw that she was still in process on her healing journey. And I don't believe no anyone has ever taught her how to share in a way that brings healing versus causes someone to essentially be re-traumatized. What was taking place was she was actually trauma dumping through her story. Trauma dumping is when someone shares intense personal pain without consent or regard for the listener's capacity, often oversharing details suddenly, repeatedly, or in spaces not equipped to hold it. So in this case, she was like sharing too many details, graphic details that honestly was not necessary to get the point across, right? And also, sometimes when someone is in a conversation with an individual, say for instance, you're at church and you meet someone there and you find out that they're going through a very difficult experience. Maybe they're going through a divorce. And when they open up to you about that and they start sharing and they pause for a moment, you also went through a divorce. You start sharing too about your experience. And before you know it, you're talking and you're saying, this is what I went through. And let me tell you, this was that, and this is that, and this is that. And you're just sharing all the details. You're dumping your trauma on this person without consent, without understanding their capacity to hear. You're oversharing, and is not helping that individual in that moment. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes we can share a piece of our story just to build connection. But before you share, let me ask you a question. What is your motivation behind sharing? Are you sharing because, again, you just need to process what information is relevant to share? And if you're sharing, just share a smidge because you don't want to hijack the conversation and make it about your trauma when you're trying to minister to that individual. Does that make sense? Okay, I see. Okay, we're appreciating this. Okay. Marilyn, Dr. Marilyn. Oh, I'm so glad to have you here. Pecan Banks is in the house. Yes. And so, ladies, this is something we want to be mindful of as we sometimes are navigating these moments in which we unintentionally cause harm to people who we're trying to help. And I often say it like this. If you were in the living room, and in the living room, there was this beautiful vase. It was a vase that had been passed down for generations. It's held sacred in your family. And you all of a sudden get distracted and you bump up against where the vase is sitting and it just falls and shatters. And you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't mean to do that. It was an accident. You didn't mean to do it. But just because it was an accident doesn't mean it still didn't cause damage. The same is true for many people in our faith communities. Oftentimes, they don't mean to cause harm when they use Christian platitudes to say, oh, heaven got another angel, or, certain things that time heals all wounds, or those scriptures of your pain. They're trying to help. But in their attempt to help, sometimes they can still cause damage, and the damage is real. And so we want to be aware of certain things so that when we do have these good intentions, we can be at a place where we still can help those who we desire to help without re traumatizing. Okay. So, another question that I want to invite you to ask yourself: if you desire to start a healing ministry, are you self aware enough to recognize when you're having an emotional response to someone else's trauma? And sometimes we hear people refer to this as trigger, but I'm using emotional response here. I'm going to say this again. Are you self aware enough to recognize when you're having an emotional response to someone else's trauma? And do you know how to regulate or care for yourself when this happens? This is huge. This is huge. I remember when I was going through my divorce, and at the time, I was leading trauma healing groups still. And I saw that we were doing the lesson on grief. And I said to myself, Jocelyn, you are a mess right now. And you can try to show up and do a lesson on grief, but you're grieving. And you probably won't be able to regulate yourself. So instead of trying to push through, take a step back and care for yourself so that you don't bleed on those who you're trying to support. And that was a major decision for me where I had to say, heal or be healed and care for yourself. But there have also been times in which I was in a group and I'm with my co-facilitators, and I've seen one of us get emotionally activated from something that was said, because it can happen. I don't care if you're a pastor. I don't care how much pastoral care training you've had. Certain things can get you emotionally stimulated. And when that happens, you got to, you know, try to first be self-aware. How am I feeling in this moment? Okay. How do I need to care for myself without judgment? Without judgment, and being at a place to acknowledge and say, okay, this is why it's helpful to have co-leaders with you. All right, I just need a moment to care for myself, and do so where you can regulate without bleeding on those who you're trying to serve, but also get the care you need. This is why. This is why I say all the time, every therapist gets to have a therapist, every pastor gets to have a pastor, because here's the thing: when we're caring and holding sacred stories and sacred spaces for other people, we also need safe spaces to have our trauma healed. And we're not exempt for feeling, and sometimes we're holding so much stuff for other people. And because we're in it, because many of us, we are very compassionate people. This is why we're in the work. We want to be self-aware enough to know when we're being impacted by it. Again, not judging, but then having a place in which we can release that. And this is why oftentimes in people who work in therapy, they have their supervision sessions. They have those sessions where they're able to get it out and talk it through so that they are able to do what they need to do. Yes, Diana, recognize, respond, and refer when needed. The 3 R's. I love that. I love that. That's so good. Yes, particularly empaths. That's right. Empaths, we need this. We need to make sure that we are self aware in this area, right? And so that is a question that I want to ask you. Now, I want to reemphasize this one point that I mentioned earlier, but Can you listen to someone else's story about their trauma without feeling the need to share your own? That is a really good test, right? Just that question alone. Again, sometimes it's appropriate and it can help if you'll share something quickly and make sure you get back on the subject at hand, the person who you're caring for. But sometimes I've encountered people where they can't have a conversation about a certain issue without them talking about themselves. And for me, that's a sign that they're still on the path of healing and they need some additional care. But that also goes back to what I said earlier. Do you have a place to process in private before you try to help people in public? These are the questions that we got to ask ourselves, right? And understanding that when it comes to this work, it's very important that we know how to set boundaries. So I'm going to ask you this. Do you truly understand the importance of setting boundaries when offering support to protect both yourself and the person you're trying to help? Okay. Boundaries keep us safe. And it doesn't just keep us safe, it keeps others safe. And sometimes we go further in the process than is healthy, even when we're wanting to help people. Let me explain. Sometimes when there are people who are hurting, we might listen to their story. We might try to help them by like giving them money or trying to solve their problem. But understand here, we are not the fixers. Okay. All right. So we got to understand we don't come in here with the superwoman cape and just try to take all their pain away. So we got to understand that, number one. But sometimes we can cross a line where we are operating like their therapist, for one, and giving advice and feedback that we're not trained on. Or we can also find ourselves going above and beyond to the point where now we're enabling individuals who are responding out of their trauma. And so we have to be careful to set some healthy boundaries with those who we're trying to care for. Because when it comes to our emotional well-being, sometimes people can be in such a space where we can find ourselves, in the space with them if we aren't careful. Again, well-intentioned. And sometimes even if you are trying to help them, if you act in a role that you have not received training for, then you can actually cause harm. I've heard countless stories of individuals who've received counseling advice from people in the church, for example, who hadn't gone through training. And that counseling advice actually led to further problems, further issues, further pain. And again, those who were doing it, they didn't mean to cause pain, but they didn't have training around that subject. They were trying to step in a lane that they weren't equipped to step into, and that can cause issues. And so here's my next question for you. Do you understand that if you want to work in the trauma healing field, it is essential to educate yourself and get trained for the kind of support you're offering? Okay. Now, there's layers to this, there's levels to this, if you will. Now, I'm not telling you that you have to go back to school to become a psychotherapist or a clinician. There's other certification programs where it could show you how to offer a level of first aid, or maybe you go through CPE, clinical pastoral education, but having some form of certification, training, something to educate you on techniques on how you can safely hold space for people without causing harm. And then in that training, still recognizing your own limits. Because here's the thing. I I certify individuals through my company through a Christian curriculum that was developed by the Trauma Healing Institute. It's essentially Bible studies that integrate scripture and mental health principles to help people heal from trauma. And we certify individuals and we show them how to lead these Christian trauma healing groups for people as facilitators. And it's a very powerful curriculum, and it's a great first step for people who want to start working in the Christian trauma healing space. And you're able to get certified within a few months. It's a beautiful curriculum, but we always tell people this: you going through this 2-month program does not make you a therapist. Okay, let's be clear. Okay, let's know our lane here. All right. Because if you try representing yourself as something that you're not, then again, well intention can cause harm. But at least you'll have a baseline understanding of how to support those people who you're called to. So, again, I want you to be thinking about this. If you desire to work with domestic violence survivors, maybe your first step is 40 hours of domestic violence training. Maybe you do want to go back to school, but how are you going to equip yourself with some sort of formal education to support those who you are seeking to support in this season? Okay, I'm loving this feedback. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Yes, thank you, Dr. Arlene. Yes, I appreciate you all. So, as we think about this, here's a scripture that's really bringing this home. Proverbs 19:2. Desire without knowledge is not good. How much more will hasty feet miss the way? Oh, when I think about that, hasty feet, stepping out a little too soon before you're ready. Again, your heart is in good place, but how are you equipping yourself? How are you equipping yourself for this road that you're called to? And don't get me wrong, just saying that you need to educate yourself and just take a pause and care for your needs first before you help others. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying heal or be healed. Before you step out, do the internal work first. Do some reflection first. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about the Trauma Healing Institute curriculum that we teach is the first 6 weeks of what we do is focused on your healing. It's so funny. I have a number of people who come to us to take the class, and they're so focused on wanting to help others. And then they get in the class and they're like, oh, wait a minute. This is about me. I'm like, yes, we have to deal with you first before we send you out here to help others. And so this training of what's sustaining you. Yes, 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 yes. I love that, Pastor Valerie. And so I want to make mention, and this is for any of you sisters who particularly you feel called to this ministry of healing. I want to invite you to visit our website at faithonthejourney.org. We actually have a training that is taking place in the very near future. And registration is for this upcoming training is actually closing tomorrow at noon. But we do have a trauma healing certification, a national trauma healing certification taking place. And you can learn more on our website about that. And if you miss this deadline, don't worry. We can add you to the wait list. Just add yourself to the wait list and we'll let you know about the next class. In addition to that, I want you, if you haven't already, if you dealt with some things in your life and you're looking for some counseling, ain't no shame. It's no shame to seeing a therapist. I stay in therapy because I know I need the help. And it's something in which we're not meant to journey through our life alone. Dr. Marilyn Pecan Banks, committed to healing work requires a commitment to having a teachable spirit. Healing is not an event, and neither is learning. How profound is that? Yes. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. It's something that I remember Dr. Pecan Banks, I want to share something that you shared with me that really blessed me years ago. I don't know if you remember this. I think you have a poster on your wall that says, healing is a practice of pause. Healing is a practice of pause. And I saw that and I was like, that is about the most profound thing. And I think sometimes because of the pain that we've gone through in our lives, we're scared to pause. I know for me, I've kept myself busy over functioning for the longest to run from my pain. It's easier to serve others and help others than to deal with your own stuff. But what if, sisters, we were courageous enough to pause? What if we were courageous enough to say, I need some help right now. I'm not okay. It takes courage to acknowledge when you're hurting. It takes courage to say, I need help. And it takes courage to pause and actually look in the face of the stuff that's hurt you in your past and face it and begin to pull back that onion so you can begin to heal. Healing is not an overnight process, but Lord Jesus, you are worth the work every day that you just begin to address it and deal and care for your heart. You slowly begin to reclaim your voice, reclaim your power. And so, sisters, just know we are on this journey together. Thank you, Lisa, for sharing. Thank you so much for sharing. Reverend Pecan Banks, I'm so excited you're here with us today. I don't know what to do. Thank you so much. Yes, Pastor Valley, the truth is not every mess is meaningless. Yes, some are invitations to figure out the message in the mess. Oh, how beautiful. Y'all dropping some gems. Yes, yes, yes. That's awesome, Diana. You took up some funds to help her find a therapist. That is beautiful. And that's the power of community. You are not meant to be on an island by yourself. You're not. And you don't have to be strong all the time. And so thank you, Reverend Pagan. I'm so grateful for you. Amen. Amen. Sister, you've helped me out through so much. But ladies, just remember that we don't have to be at a place of arrival to help others on their healing journey. But as we are helping others, we have to make sure that we're not drowning ourselves. So do the work. If you need some additional support, again, visit our website at faithonthejourney.org for more information. Also, be sure to subscribe. And if you enjoyed this episode, Ultimate Counsel, yes, yes, yes. If you enjoyed this episode, do me a favor, like it, because when you like it, it helps YouTube to push it out there to other people. And if you know of someone out there who can benefit from hearing this episode, share it with them. Share it with them. And for some of you, we'll be seeing you in our upcoming class through Faith on the Journey to help you to get equipped for the work God is calling you to. Thank you so much, Miss Griggs, for being here. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you all for tuning in live. And again, we're here week after week, every Sunday night at 6:30 p.m. Central to help you to answer that call, to help you grow in your faith and be a community. And so I hope you enjoyed this episode this evening. God bless you, sisters. And I can't wait to see you again next week. Bye for now, ladies. Take care. God bless you all.